Imagine a vast white desert where the wind screams at 200 miles per hour. A place so cold it can freeze your breath before it hits the ground. For millions of years, we believed Antarctica was nothing but a silent tomb of ice and rock. But what if the ice is finally giving up a secret it was never meant to share? Scientists recently discovered something buried miles beneath the frozen surface that defies every law of history we know. It is not a fossil or a lost river. It is a structure of precision metal and complex geometry, something that should not exist in a land untouched by human hands for eons. This is not a natural mountain peak or a trick of the light. It is technology from a forgotten era. It is a mystery suggesting our past is far more crowded than we ever imagined. Imagine a signal flickering in the dark silence of space, a digital whisper sent back to Earth from a pair of satellites orbiting hundreds of miles above the white void. The data looked clear. It was impossible. Beneath the crushing weight of the East Antarctic ice sheet, something was pulling. It was not just a standard tug of the Earth. It was a localized, massive concentration of gravity so powerful that it warped the very path of the satellites overhead. This was not a mountain. It was not a valley. It was something else entirely. Hidden under 2 miles of solid, ancient ice, a mystery was waiting. This is the story of the Wilkes Land Gravity Anomaly. In 2006, a team of researchers using NASA satellites made a discovery that would haunt the scientific community for decades. They were part of the GRACE mission, which stands for Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. Their goal was simple. They wanted to map the subtle variations in Earth's gravitational field. Usually, these maps show us the density of the crust, the location of hidden mountain ranges, or the movement of massive water tables. But when the satellites pass over a remote stretch of East Antarctica, known as Wilkes Land, the instruments went wild. They detected a mass concentration, a mascon, that should not have been there. It was nearly 300 miles wide. To put that in perspective, that is larger than the state of Maryland. It is a structure so vast that it defies easy explanation. The scientists were stunned. Gravity does not lie. If the pull is stronger in one spot, it means there is more mass there. Something incredibly heavy, incredibly dense, and incredibly large is sitting on the bedrock of the Antarctic continent. But the ice in this region is thick. It is a frozen shield that has stood for millions of years. No telescope can see through it. No human has ever walked upon the ground that lies beneath it. We are looking at a ghost, a silhouette of a giant, perceived only through the invisible fingers of gravity. At first, the theories were conventional. Scientists suggested it might be the remains of a massive asteroid impact. If a space rock large enough struck the Earth millions of years ago, it would have punched through the crust and caused a massive upwelling of the mantle. This dense mantle material would remain as a gravitational heavy spot. They compared it to the Chicxulub crater in Mexico, the site of the impact that famously wiped out the dinosaurs. But there was a problem with this theory. The Wilkes Land anomaly is more than twice the size of the Chicxulub crater. If an object that large hit the Earth, it would not have just killed the dinosaurs. It would have nearly ended life on the planet. This led researchers to look back at the Great Dying, the Permian-Triassic extinction event that occurred 250 million years ago. During that time, nearly 96% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial life vanished. The cause has always been a subject of fierce debate. Was it the Wilkes Land impact? Was this massive anomaly the smoking gun for the greatest catastrophe in the history of the world? If it is a crater, it is the largest on the planet. But the more the data was analyzed, the stranger the picture became. The density of the object did not perfectly match a simple impact site. Some independent researchers and enthusiasts began to point towards something more unsettling. They looked at the radar data. They looked at the shape. They began to wonder if the anomaly was not a natural formation at all. Could it be artificial? Could something have been built or left behind on the Antarctic continent long before the ice arrived? The idea sounds like science fiction. It sounds like a story from another world. But in the frozen silence of the South, the numbers continue to pull. Antarctica was not always a wasteland of ice and wind. As we know, it was once a lush, green continent filled with life and forests. If an advanced intelligence existed on Earth millions of years ago, or if visitors from elsewhere arrived during that era, Antarctica would have been a prime location for a base or a city. It was central to the supercontinent of Gondwana. It was a temperate paradise. If a massive structure was built there, a structure made of dense, heavy materials, it would eventually be buried. As the world cooled and the glaciers marched across the land, any trace of such a civilization would be ground into bedrock or covered by miles of ice. The Wilkes Land anomaly sits exactly where such a remnant might be found. It is positioned deep within the interior, protected by the most stable ice sheet on the planet. Some have suggested that the anomaly represents a crash craft of unimaginable proportions, a vessel that hit the Earth with such force that it became embedded in the crust. Others think it might be a massive subterranean facility, a bunker designed to survive a global cataclysm. The sheer scale of it is what makes these theories so persistent. 300 miles of high-density material does not just happen by accident. In the years following the 2006 discovery, more missions attempted to peer beneath the ice. Airborne radar was used to map the subglacial topography. They found a massive circular ridge, a rim that looks remarkably like a crater. But within that rim, the radar signals become scrambled. The ice is so old and so filled with impurities in that specific spot that it is difficult to get a clear image of the floor. It is as if the continent itself is trying to keep it secret. The ice acts as a barrier, a 2-mile thick wall of frozen water that prevents us from seeing the truth. But gravity is a persistent witness. It does not fluctuate with the weather. It does not change with the seasons. The mass is there. It is real. It is physical. And it is tugging on every satellite that passes overhead. For the mainstream scientific community, the mystery is a geological puzzle. It is a question of impact dynamics and crustal movements. But for those who look at the history of our planet with a more skeptical eye, it is a signpost. It is a reminder that we know very little about what happened on this Earth before the dawn of recorded human history. The sheer age of the ice is another factor that adds to the mystery. Some parts of the East Antarctic ice sheet are thought to be over 30 million years old. If the anomaly is an artifact or a structure, it has been preserved in a state of perfect stasis for longer than humans have walked upright. The cold is a preservative. The pressure is a stabilizer. Whatever is down there, whether it is a metallic hull or a massive deposit of mantle rock, is exactly as it was millions of years ago. It is a time capsule of the deepest kind. There are those who claim that the government knows more than they are letting on. They point to the frequent and often secret trips made by world leaders and high-ranking officials to Antarctica. They wonder why the region is so heavily regulated by the Antarctic Treaty, which restricts the types of activities that can take place there. They argue that the gravity anomaly is the real reason for the intense interest in the South Pole. If there is technology buried under the ice, technology that is millions of years ahead of our own, it would be the most valuable prize in the world. Imagine the power that would come from uncovering a structure 300 miles wide. If it is artificial, the materials used to build it would be beyond our current understanding. The energy source required to maintain its mass or its function would be revolutionary. It would change everything we know about physics, about history, and about our place in the universe. But for now, it remains a shadow, a blip on a gravity map, a strange curve in a satellite's orbit. The skeptics argue that the gravity anomaly is simply a result of the Earth's natural complexity. They say that the crust is not uniform, and that heavy minerals can cluster in ways that mimic artificial shapes. They point to the fact that we have not yet sent a drill down to the bedrock in Wilkes Land to take a sample. And they are right. Without a physical sample, we are only guessing. But drilling through 2 miles of ice in one of the most hostile environments on Earth is a monumental task. It would cost billions of dollars. It would take years of preparation. And it would require a level of international cooperation that is rarely seen in modern science. Until that day comes, the Wilkes Land gravity anomaly will remain one of the great mysteries of the modern world. It is a silent giant sleeping beneath the ice, a force of nature or a relic of a lost era that refuses to be ignored. Every time a satellite passes over that specific patch of white desert, it feels the pull. It is a reminder that beneath the surface of our world, there are things we have yet to discover. There are stories written in stone and gravity that we have yet to read. The more we look at Antarctica, the more we realize it is not just a continent of ice. It is a continent of secrets. The gravity anomaly is just the beginning. It is the loudest signal in a land filled with whispers. As our technology improves, as our satellites become more sensitive and our radar more powerful, the image will become clearer. We will eventually see through the 2 miles of ice. We will eventually reach the bedrock. And when we do, we will find out if we are looking at the scar of an ancient impact or the greatest archaeological discovery in the history of humankind. The ice is retreating. In some parts of the continent, the glaciers are thinning at an alarming rate. While this is a tragedy for the climate, it is a revelation for history. The ice that has guarded these secrets for millions of years is finally giving them up. We are starting to see the true face of the Antarctic continent. We are starting to see the mountains and the valleys that have been hidden since the dawn of time. And somewhere in the middle of all that beauty and terror, the gravity anomaly is waiting. It is a mystery that pulls at us, demanding to be solved, suggesting that the ground beneath our feet holds wonders and dangers that we are only beginning to imagine. In the frozen darkness of Wilkes Land, the tug continues. The satellites keep falling toward the mystery, and the world waits for the day when the ice finally speaks the truth. Imagine for a moment that everything we know about the timeline of human history is wrong. That thousands of years before the first pharaoh sat on a throne and long before the first stone was laid for the Great Wall, a civilization flourished in a place we now consider a frozen graveyard. This is the mystery of the 70th parallel. It is a story that does not start with a shovel in the dirt, but with a piece of parchment found in a dusty library. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a map of the world. For his time, it was a masterpiece of navigation. But there was a problem, a big one. The map showed the coastline of South America and the western coast of Africa with incredible accuracy. But as your eyes move further south, you see something that should be impossible. There, at the bottom of the world, is a landmass that looks exactly like the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. And here's the kicker. It shows the coast without any ice. Think about that for a second. Modern science tells us that Antarctica has been covered in a thick, suffocating sheet of ice for millions of years. But the Piri Reis map shows bays, rivers, and mountain ranges that were only confirmed in the 20th century using seismic sounding and ground-penetrating radar. Piri Reis wrote in his own notes that he did not sail these waters himself. He said he compiled his work from much older source maps. Some, he claimed, dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. Others were even older. This leads us to a haunting question. Who mapped the Antarctic coastline when it was free of ice? Who had the technology, the mathematics, and the global reach to record the geography of a continent that was supposed to be a secret until the 1820s? For many, this is the first whisper of an ancient technology that has been lost to the fog of time. It suggests that someone thousands of years ago was looking at the world with the eyes of a modern explorer. But the maps are just the beginning. As our own technology has advanced, we have stopped looking at the surface and started looking through it. Antarctica is a place where the ice is so thick it actually bends the crust of the earth. In some places, it is nearly 3 miles deep. For a long time, we assumed that beneath that ice was just a flat, boring slab of rock. We were wrong. When NASA launched Operation Icebridge, they used specialized planes equipped with laser altimeters and radar that could peer through the white void. What they found was a landscape that was far more dramatic than anything we see on the surface. They found valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon. They found mountain ranges that rival the Alps. And in a few specific locations, they found things that did not look natural at all. One of the most famous and controversial discoveries happened near the Ellsworth Mountains. On Google Earth, and later confirmed by satellite photography, observers noticed 3 distinct structures poking through the snow. They were not just random piles of rock. They were symmetrical. They had 4 sides. They looked exactly like pyramids. Now, geologists will tell you that these are just nunataks. That is a fancy word for a mountain peak that sticks out above a glacier. They say that natural erosion can create sharp angles and flat faces. And they might be right. But when you look at the images, the symmetry is haunting. One of these structures has a base that is almost identical in scale to the Great Pyramid of Giza. If it is a natural formation, it is one of the most incredible coincidences in the history of geology. But if it is not natural, it is a monument to a civilization that lived on a green Antarctica long before the ice took over. There is a theory that explains how this could be possible. It is called crustal displacement. It was popularized by Professor Charles Hapgood and even supported by Albert Einstein. The theory suggests that every few thousand years, the entire outer shell of the Earth shifts, like the skin of an orange sliding over the fruit. Hapgood believed that around 12,000 years ago, the continent of Antarctica was located about 2,000 miles further north than it is today. It would have been in a temperate zone. It would have had forests, rivers, and a climate that could support human life. If that is true, then Antarctica was not a frozen wasteland. It was a prime location for a burgeoning civilization. Imagine a culture that lived along those temperate coasts. They would have been masters of the sea. They would have developed astronomy to navigate the open ocean. They would have had the technology to build great cities and map the globe. And then the shift happened in a geological heartbeat. Their world moved into the polar circle. The temperatures plummeted. The snow began to fall, and it never stopped. Their cities, their monuments, and their technology were swallowed by the rising tide of ice. This sounds like science fiction, but the evidence keeps mounting. Scientists drilling into the subglacial lakes have found strange things. Lake Vostok is one of the largest freshwater lakes on Earth, but it is buried under 2 miles of ice. It has been sealed off from the rest of the world for millions of years. When researchers used thermal mapping on the lake, they found something they could not explain. There is a massive magnetic anomaly in the northern part of the lake. It is a huge area where the magnetic field is significantly stronger than the surrounding region. Some scientists suggest it is just a specific type of rock formation. But others have a more radical idea. They believe it could be the remains of a massive metallic structure, something buried deep beneath the silt of the lake bed, a piece of ancient technology so large that it is still throwing off a magnetic signature after all these millennia. Think about the energy required to create something that big. Think about the level of engineering. And it is not just magnetic anomalies. In recent years, researchers have detected strange radio signals coming from deep within the ice. These are not the typical sounds of shifting glaciers or cracking shells. They are repetitive. They are structured. Some have described them as sounding like a rhythmic pulse. In 2020, a team of researchers using high-altitude balloons detected particles that seemed to be rising up out of the ice instead of coming down from space. They called them anomalous events. Some physicists joked that it looked like time was running backward. But maybe it is not time travel. Maybe it is something else. Maybe there is technology still functioning deep beneath the ice. We know that the Earth is geologically active in Antarctica. There are volcanoes under the ice sheets. There are geothermal vents that keep the subglacial lakes liquid. If an ancient civilization wanted to survive the freezing of their continent, where would they go? They would go down. They would use the heat of the Earth to stay warm. They would build their final refuges in the caverns and valleys that are now sealed away by a mile of frozen water. There are stories from pilots who have flown over the South Pole that speak of seeing giant holes in the ice, openings that lead into the darkness below. Most of these reports are dismissed as hallucinations or optical illusions caused by the harsh Antarctic sun. But then you have the accounts from people like Admiral Richard Byrd. Byrd was a hero, a decorated explorer, who led multiple expeditions to Antarctica in the 1930s and 40s. He once wrote in his diary about a land beyond the pole. He spoke of a place that was green and warm, a place that should not exist in the middle of a frozen desert. While many people think these stories are just legends, we have to look at the facts. We are finding fossilized tropical plants in the Antarctic soil. We are finding the remains of dinosaurs that lived in lush forests. We know the continent was once green. The only question is whether humans were there to see it. Every year, the ice melts a little more. The glaciers are retreating at a rate that has scientists worried about the future of our planet. But for those looking for the truth about our past, the melting ice is a gift. It is like a curtain being pulled back. Fragments of bone, pieces of carved stone, and metallic signatures are being revealed for the first time in 10,000 years. We are entering a new era of Antarctic exploration. We are no longer just trying to survive the cold. We are looking for the whispers of the people who came before us. We are looking for the technology that allowed them to map the world when the rest of humanity was still living in caves. And as we dig deeper and skim further, we are realizing that the 70th parallel is not just a line on a map. It is a boundary between the world we know and a history that is much older and much more mysterious than we ever dared to imagine. The ice is thin. The signals are getting stronger. And as the world watches, the secrets of the southern continent are finally beginning to thaw. What we find there might not just change our history books. It might change our understanding of what it means to be a technological civilization on a planet that is constantly shifting beneath our feet. The whispers from the 70th parallel are becoming a roar, and the truth is waiting just beneath the surface. Imagine a radar beam piercing through 2 miles of solid ice. It travels through layers of snow, through compressed blue glacial walls, and finally hits the bedrock. Usually, the return signal shows the messy, jagged outlines of ancient mountains. It shows valleys carved by rivers that dried up 30 million years ago. But in 2021, something different happened. A research plane was flying over the heart of East Antarctica, near a place called the South Pole of Inaccessibility. This is a point on the continent furthest from any ocean in every direction. It is the most isolated spot on the planet. The technicians on board were looking at their screens, expecting more of the same rocky terrain. Then the signal changed. The messy lines of nature vanished. In their place appeared something that should not exist. A perfect vertical wall, a flat top, a structure so symmetrical and so massive that it made the surrounding mountains look like piles of rubble. This was not a mountain. It was the subglacial monolith. The discovery sent shockwaves through the small community of polar researchers. When we talk about nature, we talk about chaos. Mountains have cracks. They have slopes. They have erosion. But this object was different. It stood nearly 3,000 feet tall, buried entirely beneath the ice sheet. Its sides were perfectly straight, rising at 90-degree angles from the floor of a deep subglacial valley. For the scientists staring at the data, the reality was merciless. Geologic processes do not create 90-degree angles on a scale of 3,000 feet. This was geometry. This was design. To understand why this is so terrifying from mainstream history, you have to think about the timeline. The ice sheet in this part of Antarctica has been stable for at least 15 million years. Some estimates say it has been there for 30 million. If there is a building, a monument, or a machine sitting on the bedrock beneath that ice, it means it was placed there before the ice formed. It means someone or something was building massive structures in Antarctica millions of years before the first humans even learned to walk upright. This is not just a mystery. It is a complete collapse of everything we thought we knew about the history of our world. The radar data, known as voxels, allows scientists to build a three-dimensional map of what lies beneath. As they refined the image, the monolith became even more baffling. It was not just a solid block. The radar waves were bouncing off internal voids. There were rooms. There were long, straight corridors that stretched for miles inside the structure. Think about the scale of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is a wonder of the world, standing about 480 feet tall. Now imagine a structure 6 times that height, built with precision that exceeds modern engineering, hidden under a moving glacier that weighs billions of tons. The team named the project Bed Machine, an effort to map the entire continent's floor. But when they hit the coordinates of the monolith, the data suddenly became classified. The public map showed a strange blur in that specific sector, but insiders whisper about what the unblurred images revealed. The monolith was not alone. It was the center of a grid. A series of smaller, rectangular objects were arranged around it, like a city laid out with mathematical perfection. These structures were made of material that was highly conductive. The radar signals did not just bounce off them. They were absorbed and re-emitted in a way that suggested the presence of metal. Not just any metal, but a complex alloy that does not occur in nature. What is perhaps most haunting is the role of technology in this discovery. We used to rely on explorers with sled dogs and compasses. They could only see what was on the surface. But today, we have satellites and high-frequency radar. We are peeling back the ice like a blanket, and we are finding that the past waits patiently beneath. The glacier became both a tomb and a protector. If this structure had been in any other part of the world, the rain and the wind and the footsteps of civilizations would have ground it into dust. But in Antarctica, the ice locked it in a vacuum. It preserved a chapter of history that was never supposed to be written. The temperature readings in the area added another layer to the puzzle. Usually, the deeper you go into the ice, the colder it gets, until you reach the bedrock where the Earth's natural crustal heat warms things up slightly. But around the monolith, the sensors picked up a massive thermal anomaly. The ice directly touching the structure was melting. This was not volcanic heat. Volcanoes create hot spots that are irregular and messy. This heat was consistent. It was as if the monolith itself was radiating energy. Some researchers suggested it could be a nuclear power source that has been humming away for millions of years. Others thought it might be something even more advanced, a form of energy we have not yet discovered. Imagine the frustration of the scientists. They know it is there. They can see its outline. They can measure its heat. But it is buried under 2 miles of the hardest, coldest ice on Earth. To reach it, you would need to drill a hole deeper than any ever attempted in such conditions. You would need a massive amount of fuel, equipment, and secrecy. And according to some whistleblowers, that is exactly what happened. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, there were reports of heavy equipment being moved to the interior of Antarctica under the cover of night. Large, unmarked transport planes were spotted flying into restricted zones. The official story was that they were building new research stations, but the locations did not make sense for meteorology or biology. They were positioned directly above the radar anomalies. But this was not the first sign that the ice was hiding something artificial. We have to look back at the Piri Reis map, a famous document from 1513. This map shows the coastline of Antarctica with incredible detail. The weird part? It shows the coastline without any ice. It shows rivers, bays, and mountains that were only confirmed in the 20th century through seismic sounding. How could a map maker in the 16th century know what the land looked like under the ice? The only logical answer is that he copied his map from much older sources that were created when the monolith was still standing in the sun, surrounded by the rainforest we talked about in the previous segment. Antarctica really is a place full of mysteries. We often romanticize it as a pristine wilderness. But for those who study the subglacial maps, it is starting to look like a crime scene or an archaeological dig. Every time a new satellite like ISAT-2 goes into orbit, the resolution of our vision improves. And with that vision comes a realization that the continent is not an empty wasteland. It is a graveyard of a lost era. The monolith is just the most visible part of it. There are also bridges. There are things that look like landing strips. There are formations that resemble massive, circular hangars. The skeptics will say it is just rocks. They will say that humans have a tendency to see patterns where none exist. They call it pareidolia. It is the same thing that happens when people see a face on Mars or a rabbit in the moon. But when the pattern is backed up by thermal data, by electrical conductivity, and by perfect 90-degree angles, the pareidolia argument starts to fall apart. You cannot have a natural rock formation that is hollow, metallic, and radiating constant heat in the middle of a frozen desert. Think about the human cost of this knowledge. Many of the researchers who first flagged these anomalies found their funding cut. Others were moved to different projects. The reality is that the discovery of ancient technology in Antarctica would change the global power structure overnight. Whoever controls the monolith, whoever understands how it was built or how it generates heat, will become the most powerful entity on Earth. It will be like a caveman finding a smartphone. We are looking at technology that makes our current science look like stone tools. As we look at the maps of East Antarctica, we see a ghost of a landscape. It is a world that was frozen in an instant. The monolith stands as a testament to the resilience of those who built it. It is a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge has always been intertwined with risk. Sometimes the world is not ready to listen to what the ice has to say, but the ice is retreating. The world is warming and the glaciers are thinning. The monolith is getting closer to the surface every single year. The location where the monolith was found is especially dangerous. It is a region of extreme high pressure and winds that can reach 200 miles per hour. Even modern planes struggle to fly there. But despite the danger, the interest is growing. Private companies and billionaires are rumored to be planning their own expeditions. They are not looking for fossils or amber. They are looking for the monolith. They are looking for the source of the heat. They are looking for the truth that has been buried for 15 million years. What if the monolith is not a tomb? What if it is a beacon? In 2020, strange signals from deep beneath the ice were detected by the Anita experiment. We talked about those signals earlier, the ones that seem to move backward in time. But some researchers noticed that the source of those particles was perfectly aligned with the coordinates of the subglacial monolith. The particles were not just random space dust. They were being emitted from the structure. It was as if something inside had been triggered, as if the monolith was waking up. The pursuit of this mystery leads us to the most uncomfortable question of all. If we are not the first civilization to rule this planet, what happened to the ones that came before? Did they leave for the stars? Or did they see the ice coming and realize they cannot stop it? The monolith might be their final message. It is a message written in metal and stone, protected by the most hostile environment on Earth. It is a reminder that sometimes the past waits patiently until the world is ready to listen. The whispers from the dark valley are getting louder, and the monolith is no longer just a blip on a radar screen. It is the key to our entire history. And as the ice continues to melt, that key is about to turn. Imagine a drill bit grinding through 4 kilometers of solid, ancient ice. For weeks, the sound is a constant, deafening roar against the silence of the Antarctic plateau. Then, suddenly, the resistance vanishes. The pressure drops. The drill has broken through, but it has not hit rock. It has entered a void, a massive, hollow chamber buried miles beneath the surface. This is the moment every researcher fears and craves. It is a descent into a world that has not seen the sun in 15 million years. This is not a scene from a movie. It is the reality of a subglacial exploration that is currently unfolding at the bottom of our world. For decades, we viewed Antarctica as a solid block of ice sitting on a solid block of stone. We were wrong. As our technology improved, as satellite radar began to peel back the layers of the frozen crust, we found something impossible. A network of over 400 lakes, rivers that flow uphill due to the crushing weight of the ice. And most unsettling of all, enormous hollow spaces, void that seemed to breathe. One of the most significant of these discoveries happened near the Gamburtsev Mountains. These are the ghost mountains we discussed before. They are peaks the size of the Alps, completely submerged in ice. When scientists flew over this region with deep penetrating radar, the images that came back caused a stir in the global scientific community. They did not just see jagged peaks and valleys. In a specific sector of East Antarctica, the radar hit something flat, something geometric, something that reflected radio waves with the intensity of refined metal. The coordinates were logged. The data was checked and rechecked. The results remained the same. Beneath 2 miles of ice sat a structure nearly 30 miles long. It was not a mountain. It was a massive, non-natural anomaly. For years, the official reports called it a tectonic feature. But off the record, the whispers were different. Some called it the city of the ancients. Others believed it was a remnant of a civilization that existed before the ice. A civilization that saw Antarctica when it was still green, still lush, and still teeming with life. The project to reach this anomaly was a feat of human endurance that mirrors the struggles of the early explorers like Dennis Tink Bell. But this time, the enemy was not just the wind or the crevasses. It was the sheer depth of the void. To reach the chamber, the team had to use hot water drills. These are massive machines that melt their way through the ice, creating a narrow, vertical tunnel that stays open only as long as the heat is applied. One mistake, one mechanical failure, and the ice would snap shut, trapping the equipment and anyone with it in a permanent, for-kilometer tomb. As the drill approached the ceiling of the void, the sensors began to go wild. The temperature at the base of the ice sheet was rising. Usually, the deeper you go into a glacier, the colder it gets, until you hit the very bottom where geothermal heat from the earth warms it slightly. But this was different. The heat was localized. It was coming from the structure itself. When the camera was finally lowered into the darkness, the world held its breath. The images that flickered onto the monitors back at the surface station were grainy, distorted by the extreme pressure and the frigid water, but they were undeniable. The camera was floating in a massive subglacial lake, but it was not just a lake. Resting on the sill of the lake bed were shapes that defied nature. Rectangular blocks the size of skyscrapers, corridors made of a dark, obsidian-like material, and a faint, pulsing blue light that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the structure. This was the technology of the void. It was not gears and steam. It was something far more advanced, something that seemed to utilize the pressure of the ice and the salt of the water as a power source. The team called it the Oats Land anomaly, but the media had a different name for it. They called it the find of the century, the proof that humanity was not the first intelligent life to claim this planet. But with this discovery came a terrifying realization. The structure was not dead. It was idling, like a massive machine waiting for a key to turn. It was vibrating at a frequency that could be felt through the soles of the boots of the men standing on the surface miles above. This vibration is what the seismic monitors had been picking up for years. It was not the wind. It was the heartbeat of the void. The history of these maps we mentioned earlier, like the Pyrie Reis and the Orange Fine, suddenly took on a new, sobering meaning. These maps showed Antarctica without ice. They showed the coastlines, the mountains, and the river valleys with precision that was impossible for the 16th century. How could a map maker in the 1500s know the exact shape of a landmass that was supposedly covered in ice millions of years ago? The answer might lie in the technology found in the void. The history of mapping the Antarctic continent is a rabbit hole of contradictions. In 1929, a map was found in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. It was dated 1513 and signed by the Turkish Admiral Pyrie Reis. This map showed the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and most shockingly, the northern coast of Antarctica. But it showed the coastline as it would appear without ice. At the time, scholars dismissed it as a fantasy. They believed the map maker had simply imagined a southern landmass to balance the globe. But in the 1950s, Captain Arlington Mallory, a researcher of ancient maps, noticed something startling. When he compared the Pyrie Reis map to the modern seismic profiles of the Antarctic subglacial landmass, they matched perfectly. The map showed bays, islands, and mountain ranges that were hidden under a mile of ice. How could a 16th century admiral have access to a map that was accurate to the subglacial topography? He claimed he used 20 source maps, some of which dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. This suggests that someone thousands of years ago had the technology to map Antarctica before the ice became an impenetrable barrier. This is not just a curiosity of history. It is a piece of evidence that points directly to the void. If the maps are real, then the civilization that created them must have been real. And if they were real, then the structures we're finding under the ice are the physical remains of that lost era. The Orange Fine map of 1531 is another example. It shows Antarctica in even greater detail, including rivers and mountains that have since been confirmed by modern radar. The accuracy is so high that it suggests the use of spherical trigonometry. This is a level of mathematics that we thought was not developed until much later in human history. Yet there it is, printed on a 16th century map, depicting a continent that was officially discovered in 1820. These maps are the paper trail of the ancient technology that now sits in the void. When we talk about the descent into the void, we are not just talking about a physical journey down a hole in the ice. We are talking about a journey back through time. We are peeling back 30 million years of geological history to find a moment where humanity, or something like it, stood on the shores of a temperate Antarctic Ocean. We are finding that the raw, dangerous frontier of Antarctica was once a hub of activity, a place where the master builders of the ancient world erected monuments that would survive the weight of a continent. The environment down there is merciless. The water is under such extreme pressure that it should be solid, yet the heat from the anomaly keeps it liquid. This creates a highly volatile state. If the roof of the void were to collapse, the resulting surge of water and ice could destabilize the entire East Antarctic ice sheet. It would be a catastrophe of global proportions. Yet the drive to know, the restless curiosity that pushes us forward, is irresistible. We cannot help ourselves. We must see what is at the bottom of the abyss. As the mission continues, more artifacts are being recovered from the edges of the subglacial lake. They are not made of wood or stone. They are made of a complex metallic alloy that does not rust, even after millions of years in salt water. One of these items, a small, circular disc covered in fine, etched lines, has been sent to London for analysis. Preliminary tests show that the etchings are not just decoration. They are a form of circuitry, a microscopic map of energy flow that is more intricate than anything we can produce today. The technology we are finding is not just ancient, it is alien in its design. The circular disc recovered from the lake bed has been analyzed using electron microscopy. The etchings are not carved. They are grown. The metallic structure appears to be a form of synthetic crystal, capable of conducting energy with zero loss. This is a technology we are only beginning to understand in our most advanced laboratories. The discovery of Dennis Bell's body in 1959 was a tragedy that became a story of closure 60 years later. But the discovery in the void is a story that is just beginning. It is a story of a past that is so far removed from our own that it feels like science fiction. But the metal is real, the heat is real, and the blue light pulsing in the dark is real. Antarctica is no longer just a frozen wasteland. It is a vault, and the descent into the void has shown us that the vault is finally being opened. As the ice retreats, the secrets it's guarded for eons are being surrendered to a world that may not be ready for what it finds. The silence of the glacier has been broken, and the echo of what lies beneath is beginning to grow louder. We must consider the cost, not just the financial cost of the drilling or the human cost of the isolation, but the cost to our understanding of ourselves. If we find that we are not the pinnacle of terrestrial intelligence, if we find that a superior technology has been sitting in the dark beneath us for millions of years, how does that change our future? The void is not just a hole in the ice. It is a hole in our history, and we are falling into it. The next phase of the exploration involves a manned descent, a pressurized submersible designed to withstand the crushing depths of the subglacial lake, is currently being transported to the site. It is a mission of extreme risk. There is no rescue possible at those depths. If the sub fails, it becomes another time capsule, joining the wreckage of the ancient city in the dark. But the team is undeterred. They have seen the light. They have heard the heartbeat. And they will not stop until they have touched the walls of the void. The team at the research station is now preparing for the arrival of the deep-sea submersible. The logistics are staggering. Fuel, food, and specialized equipment must be flown in during the brief Antarctic summer. The weather is a constant threat. A single blizzard can halt operations for weeks, leaving the crew isolated in the most remote place on Earth. But the allure of what lies below is too strong to resist. They are driven by the same spirit that led the early explorers into the white unknown. They are ready to descend into the void, to touch the forbidden architecture of the past, and to finally understand the secret that the ice has been keeping. This is the rawest frontier, a place where the laws of the modern world do not apply, where GPS is useless, and the only way forward is through instinct and iron. We are walking in the footsteps of giants, both the explorers who died on the surface and the unknown architects who built the world below. The ice is giving up its secrets, one layer at a time, and as we descend further into the darkness, we find that the void is not empty at all. It is full of the ghosts of a world we never knew existed. The silence of Antarctica is being replaced by the hum of modern machinery and the pulse of ancient power. The void is calling, and as we descend, we realize that we are not just discovering a new part of our world. We are discovering a new part of ourselves. The mystery is no longer out there in the stars. It is down there, beneath the ice, waiting for us to turn the key. The recovery of explorers from the past showed us that the glacier is a storyteller. But the story it is telling now is one of global civilization, of ancient technology, and of a mystery that spans the entire history of our planet. The void is waiting. The light is pulsing. And the descent has only just begun. Imagine a world where the floor is not quite level even when it looks perfectly flat, where a hallway seems to stretch toward a distant point, but as you walk toward it you arrive in a single step. This sounds like a fever dream or a scene from a science fiction movie. But for a small team of researchers working in the shadow of the Gambertsev Mountains deep in the heart of East Antarctica, this became a chilling reality. It all started with a simple radar scan. They were looking for ancient lakes buried beneath 2 miles of ice. What they found instead was a structure that should not exist. A series of vaults built with a geometry that defies every rule of mathematics we have ever known. In the world of science, we usually talk about Euclidean geometry. It is the math of flat surfaces and straight lines. It is the world we live in. But what these scientists detected was something else. They call it non-Euclidean. In these vaults, the angles of a triangle do not add up to 180 degrees. Parallel lines eventually cross. And the deeper the team scanned, the more they realized they were looking at a complex of buildings that seemed to fold in on themselves. It was as if someone had built a city using the logic of a 4-dimensional shadow. This is not fiction. It happened during a secret survey in the winter of 2023. The discovery was made by a specialized autonomous probe. This robot was designed to melt through the ice and send back images of the bedrock. When it finally reached the bottom, it did not hit rock. It hit a smooth black surface that was harder than diamond. The probe began to move through a series of openings. On the monitors back at the surface, the scientists watched in stunned silence. The internal spaces of the vault did not match the external dimensions. From the outside, the structure looked like a small hill, but on the inside, the probe traveled for miles through winding corridors that seemed to change shape as the camera pined across them. Think about it. We have spent centuries mapping the surface of the Earth. We have sent satellites to the edges of our solar system. Yet here in the one place on our own planet, where no human has lived for millions of years, there is a structure that suggests a technology far beyond our current understanding. But who could have built it? And why? The material of the vaults is just as strange as their shape. When the probe tried to take a sample, the drill bit shattered. The surface of the walls was perfectly reflective, but it did not show a normal reflection. One researcher described it as looking into a mirror that showed a room from 5 minutes ago. It was as if the material itself was interacting with time and space. Some scientists believe this is a form of shadow matter. This is a theoretical type of matter that exists right alongside us, but does not interact with light. If someone could figure out how to build with it, they could create structures that are invisible to the naked eye but solid as a rock. But that was not the only thing that sent shock waves through the team. As the probe moved deeper, it began to detect a faint rhythmic pulse. It was not a mechanical sound. It was a gravitational wave. Every few seconds, the vaults would emit a tiny ripple that slightly altered the weight of objects nearby. This suggested that the vaults were not just empty buildings. They were active. They were a piece of machinery. A massive planet-scale device that has been humming away beneath the ice for longer than the human race has existed. Wait a minute. If these vaults are active, why haven't we noticed them before? The answer lies in the sheer weight of the Antarctic ice sheet. The millions of tons of pressure act as a shield. They muffle the signals and hide the structures from conventional satellites. It was only by drilling deep and using high-frequency gravitational sensors that the team was able to peek behind the curtain. And what they saw was a layout that mirrored the stars. Not the stars as they look tonight, but the stars as they looked over 30 million years ago. This brings us to a terrifying realization. Antarctica was not always a frozen wasteland. As we learned earlier, it was once a lush rainforest teeming with life. But these vaults do not look like they were built by a civilization that grew up in a jungle. They look like they were designed for a world with different gravity and different laws of physics. Some members of the team have suggested that these are not buildings at all, but form a stabilized wormhole. They believe the non-Euclidean geometry is a side effect of a doorway that connects Antarctica to another point in the universe. The lead researcher on the project was a man who preferred to remain anonymous for years. He described the experience of looking at the radar data as a brain bug. Once you see the impossible shapes, you cannot unsee them. Your mind tries to flatten the images to make them make sense, but it fails. He spent months trying to map the interior of the vaults, but the map would change every time he ran the simulation. It was as if the vaults were a living organism that shifted its internal organs to avoid being understood. The psychological toll on the team was immense. Several researchers reported feeling a sense of intense spatial disorientation. They would walk across a flat floor in their base camp and feel as if they were climbing a steep hill. This is a known effect of being near high-intensity gravitational anomalies. The vaults were literally warping the perception of the people on the surface. It was as if the ancient technology was reaching out through the ice to warn them away. But where did the technology come from? To find an answer, we have to look back at the supercontinent of Gondwana. When the land was still joined together, Antarctica sat at the center of a giant puzzle. It was the anchor for South America, Africa, and Australia. If an advanced civilization wanted to place a device that could monitor the entire planet, the South Pole would be the perfect location. From here, they could observe the shifting of the tectonic plates and the flow of the oceans. Some theorists believe that the vaults are part of a global network. They suggest that there are similar structures buried under the sands of Sahara and the deep trenches of the Pacific Ocean. But the Antarctic site is the most important because it has been preserved by the ice, while the other sites have been destroyed by erosion or buried by shifting earth. The vaults in Antarctica have remained perfectly intact. They are a time capsule of a lost era of planetary engineering. As the probe continued its journey, it entered a central chamber that was so large the radar could not find the walls. In the center of this void was a single object. It was a sphere of pure golden light that did not cast any shadows. It sat there suspended in the air without any visible support. The sensors on the probe began to go haywire. The temperature readings jumped from freezing to boiling in a split second. Then the connection cut out. The last image sent back was of the sphere beginning to unfold like a piece of paper. This incident has been kept under a tight veil of secrecy. Most of the data was confiscated by various government agencies, but the rumors continue to leak out. Those who have seen the full footage say that the sphere was not just a light. It was a map, a real-time display of every living thing on the planet. If that is true, it means that whoever built the vaults is still watching. They have created a system that has survived the rise and fall of dinosaurs and the birth of human civilization. The discovery of the non-Euclidean vaults changes everything we know about our history. It suggests that we are not the first intelligent life to call this planet home. We are just the latest guest in a house that was built by someone else. A someone who understood the secrets of gravity and the hidden dimensions of space. As the ice continues to melt due to the warming world, more of these structures may be revealed. The secrets that have been hidden for millions of years are finally coming to the surface. Antarctica is no longer just a continent of snow and wind. It is a laboratory of the impossible. The vaults are standing there in the dark, waiting for someone with a key to open them. But we have to ask ourselves if we are ready for what we might find inside. The geometry of the vaults reminds us that our understanding of reality is very limited. There are shapes we cannot see and sound we cannot hear. And somewhere deep beneath the 2-mile thick ice of the South Pole, the heart of an ancient machine is still beating. We are just beginning to scratch the surface of this frozen mystery. Every new layer of sediment and every new radar scan brings us closer to truth that could rewrite every textbook on Earth. The question is no longer whether ancient technology exists in Antarctica. The question is what that technology is doing to us right now. The vaults are not just a relic of the past. They are a signal from a future we are not yet ready to face. And as the researchers pack their bags and head back to the world of straight lines and simple math, they cannot help but look over their shoulders. They know that the ice is watching. They know that the silence of the South Pole is not empty. It is a silence of waiting. And the vaults are still there, folding and unfolding in the dark. In 1929, a German theologian was organizing the library of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. He was working through piles of ancient documents, sorting through the remnants of the Ottoman Empire. He pulled a piece of gazelle skin parchment from a dusty shelf. It was a fragment, a jagged, faded scrap of a map. It had been drawn in the year 1513 by a man named Piri Reis. He was an admiral in the Ottoman Navy, a renowned navigator, and a collector of secrets. At first, it looked like a typical map from the Age of Discovery. It showed the coast of Africa and the eastern edge of South America. But as the scholars looked closer, their hands began to shake. There, at the bottom of the parchment, was a coastline that shouldn't be there. It was a jagged line of land, reaching across the bottom of the world. It was the northern coast of Antarctica. But there was a problem. A terrifying, impossible problem. Antarctica was not officially discovered until the year 1820. That is more than 300 years after Piri Reis dipped his pen in ink. Even more shocking was the detail. The map did not show a wall of ice. It showed a coastline of bays, mountains, and rivers. It looked like a continent that was teeming with life. It looked like Antarctica as it appeared before the ice took hold. Imagine a world where the history books are missing 1,000 chapters. We are taught that the southern continent was a mystery to the ancients. We are told it was nothing more than a myth of a great southern land until the 19th century. Then this map appears. It suggests that someone, long before the dawn of modern science, had sailed to the bottom of the earth. Someone had mapped the mountains and the valleys that are now buried under 2 miles of solid ice. This is not just a curious relic. It is a challenge to everything we think we know about the timeline of human civilization. Pyre Reese was not a ghost or a traveler from the future. He was a man of his time. In the margins of his map, he wrote notes about how he created it. He did not claim to have sailed to the southern ice himself. Instead, he admitted he was a compiler. He had gathered 20 different source maps to create his masterwork. Some were from his own era. Some were from the time of Christopher Columbus. But others, he claimed, dated back to the 4th century before the Common Era. They were maps from the time of Alexander the Great. If Pyre Reese was telling the truth, then he was looking at documents from a lost age. He was seeing the world through the eyes of sailors who had been dead for 2,000 years. This raises a haunting question. Who were these ancient navigators? Who had the technology to calculate longitude and latitude with such precision that their maps could be used to chart the most remote corner of the planet? The Pyre Reese map is not just an old drawing. It is a whisper from a forgotten world. In the 1950s, a professor named Charles Hapgood decided to put the map to the test. He was not a conspiracy theorist. He was a serious academic at Keene State College. He took the map to the United States Air Force. He wanted their experts to compare the 1513 coastline with the actual subglacial topography of Antarctica. He wanted to know if the map matched the land beneath the ice. The response he received was chilling. Colonel Harold Ohlmeyer, the commander of the 8th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron, wrote back to Professor. He confirmed that the geographical details shown in the lower part of the map agreed very remarkably with the results of the seismic profile made by the Swedish-British Antarctic expedition in 1949. The land shown on the map was the exact land currently hidden under the ice cap. Then the colonel added the most important line of all. He said the squadron had no idea how the data on this map could be reconciled with the state of geographical knowledge in 1513. The reality of Antarctica is merciless. Scientists tell us that the continent has been covered in ice for millions of years. They say that the last time the coastline was free of glaciers was at least 6,000 years ago. Some say it was much longer. This creates a paradox that breaks the brain. If the map is accurate, someone had to map Antarctica at least 6 millennia ago. But 6,000 years ago, humanity was supposedly just beginning to form basic societies. We were barely building huts, let alone seafaring vessels capable of crossing the most dangerous oceans on the planet. The map shows more than just a coastline. It shows a level of mathematical understanding that was not supposed to exist until the 18th century. To create a map this accurate, you need to understand the shape of the Earth. You need to be able to calculate longitude. This is a feat of navigation that requires an accurate clock, a chronometer. This technology was not perfected until the 1700s. Yet, here is a map from 1513, based on even older sources, that shows the correct relative positions of South America and Africa. It is a map that should be impossible. The mystery deepens when you look at the other maps Pyre Reese might have used. There are other documents, like the Orange Find map from the year 1531. It also shows Antarctica in incredible detail. It shows mountains and plains. It shows the continent at the correct scale. These are not the work of people who were just guessing. These are the work of people who were looking at the world from a high vantage point. They were looking at a world that was accessible. Skeptics have tried to explain it away. They say that Pierre Reese simply ran out of room on his parchment. They argue that he bent the coastline of South America to fit the edge of the skin. They say the land at the bottom is just the tip of Argentina, distorted by a tired artist. But this explanation falls apart when you look at the seismic data. The bends and the coastline on the map do not match Argentina. They match Queen Maud Land. They match the Princess Martha Coast. They match the secret, frozen valleys that no human eye had seen for thousands of years until the invention of ground-penetrating radar. This leads us into a dark and fascinating territory. If an ancient civilization mapped Antarctica when it was green, what happened to them? Where did they go? Some researchers suggest that the Earth's crust shifted. They believe that Antarctica was once located much further north. They think it was a temperate land, a home to a great culture. Then, in a sudden and catastrophic movement, the continent slid into the polar circle. The climate shifted in an instant. The green forests were swallowed by the snow. The cities, if they existed, were entombed in a coffin of ice. If this theory is true, then the Pierre Reese map is the only surviving evidence of our true history. It is a ghost of a world that was erased by a planetary disaster. It suggests that our ancestors were not primitive hunters wandering in the dark. They were masters of the sea. They were astronomers. They were explorers who knew the true face of the world. The map is a bridge between our modern science and a forgotten golden age. As we look at the modern discoveries in Antarctica, the map becomes even more haunting. We have found ancient pollen. We have found fossilized rainforests. We have found golden droplets of amber that prove the continent was once a jungle. We have even found strange signals in subglacial lakes that suggest the land is far more active than we once believed. Everything we are discovering with our multi-billion-dollar satellites and our deep core drills was already hinted at on a piece of gazelle skin in 1513. The map tells us that the ice is a mask. It is a temporary shroud over a land that has its own stories to tell. It suggests that the history of the human race is much older and much more complex than we have been led to believe. We think we are the first to conquer the elements. We think we are the first to map the globe. But the Pierre Reese map stands as a silent witness to a different truth. It is a reminder that the past is not always behind us. Sometimes it is waiting for us, buried under the ice, recorded on a scrap of parchment that should not exist. The Admiral Pierre Reese met a tragic end. He was executed by the Sultan in the year 1553. His maps were packed away and forgotten for centuries. They survived fires, wars, and the rise and fall of empires. They waited in the darkness of the palace library until a scholar pulled them back into the light. And now, as the ice in Antarctica begins to retreat under a warming sun, the secrets of the map are becoming more relevant than ever. The secret valleys it charted are being revealed for the second time in history. The map is a warning and a promise. It warns us that the Earth can change in ways we cannot imagine. It promises us that there is more to discover. It tells us that the white desert at the bottom of the world is not just a wasteland. It is a graveyard of secrets. And as we continue to probe the depths of the southern continent, we may find that the map was only the beginning. We may find that the true technology of the ancients is not just recorded on parchment. It is still there, waiting in the silence. And the deeper we drill, the closer we get to the heart of a mystery that could rewrite the story of humanity. But even as the map points the way, the ice continues to shift. The mountains are still there, hidden and heavy, pressing down on a history that the world is not yet ready to believe. Imagine standing in the middle of a white desert where the silence is so heavy it feels like a physical weight against your ears. You are miles away from the nearest human being, surrounded by a frozen landscape that has not changed in 30 million years. But then you feel it, a vibration, a low, pulsing thrum that seems to come from deep within the earth itself. It is not the sound of the wind, and it is not the shifting of the ice. It is a rhythm. It is a resonance. For years, people thought these sounds were just ghost stories told by lonely researchers. But as our technology has improved, we have realized that the ice is indeed singing, and the song it is singing might just be the most important discovery in the history of the human race. For decades, the standard scientific view was that Antarctica was a tectonic graveyard, a place where nothing happened except for the slow, grinding movement of glaciers. But in the early 2000s, a series of satellite readings began to tell a different story. They found something buried deep beneath the ice of East Antarctica that should not be there. It was a massive magnetic anomaly, stretching for more than 30 miles. To put that in perspective, that is a structure or a deposit larger than many major cities. It was located near the northern end of Lake Vostok, one of the largest subglacial lakes in the world. When the data first came in, the researchers thought their instruments were broken. Magnetic anomalies of that size and intensity usually mean one of two things. Either there is a massive deposit of iron or there is something metallic and artificial of incredible proportions. Think about that for a second. We are talking about an area miles below the surface where the magnetic field is so distorted that it interferes with navigation equipment. Some experts suggested it was just a natural geological feature, but others noticed something strange about the shape of the anomaly. It was too regular. It had edges and boundaries that looked less like a random rock formation and more like a structured object. This sparked a wave of theories that have never truly been silenced. Could it be a remnant of a lost civilization? Or perhaps something even older, a piece of technology that was intentionally buried before the ice even formed? This brings us to the concept of the resonance of the ancients. In the world of physics, every object has a natural frequency. If you hit it with the right vibration, it will ring like a bell. In recent years, scientists have deployed incredibly sensitive seismic sensors across the Transantarctic mountains. These sensors were designed to listen for earthquakes, but they picked up something far more mysterious. They detected a constant low-frequency hum that seems to be broadcast from specific locations deep beneath the mountain range. This is not the random noise of a shifting planet. It is a stable, consistent signal. Some have compared it to a heartbeat. Others call it a beacon. If there is indeed ancient technology buried under the ice, it would explain one of the greatest mysteries in the history of cartography. You might have heard of the Piri Reis map. It was drawn in 1513 by a Turkish admiral. What makes this map so terrifying to historians is that it appears to show the coastline of Antarctica with incredible accuracy. But there's a catch. It shows the coastline without any ice. It shows bays, rivers, and mountain ranges that were not discovered by modern science until the middle of the 20th century. When the map was analyzed by experts at the United States Air Force, they reached a startling conclusion. The geographical details in the lower part of the map agreed very remarkably with the results of the seismic profile made by the Swedish-British Antarctic Expedition of 1949. This means that whoever provided the original source data for that map saw Antarctica when it was green. But science tells us the continent has been frozen for millions of years. So, how is this possible? Unless, of course, the timeline we have been taught is wrong. Or unless there was a civilization with technology so advanced that they could map the continent through the ice. Or perhaps they're the ones who were there before the Great Freeze began. This is the resonance that historians are trying to tune into. It is the idea that we are not the first masters of this planet. But the evidence does not stop with maps and magnetic blips. Let's look at the radar data. Modern ground-penetrating radar has become so sharp that it can see through miles of solid ice as if it were glass. In 2012, a research mission using these tools found something that stopped them in their tracks. They were scanning a region of the Queen Maud Land when they saw a series of reflections that were perfectly linear. In nature, you rarely see a straight line that continues for 5 miles. But there it was, a straight, metallic reflection deep in the crust. It looked like a conduit. It looked like a pipe or a tunnel. When the team tried to get a closer look, they found that the area was strangely shielded. Their signals were being bounced back or scrambled. It was as if something down there did not want to be seen. This led to the discovery of what some call the ghost signals of the South Pole. These are radio bursts that originate from inside the ice itself. They are not coming from space, and they are not coming from human radio towers. They are coming from the dark. Some researchers believe these signals are the result of ancient machinery that is still functioning on some level. Perhaps it is powered by the intense pressure of the ice or the thermal heat from the volcanic activity we know exists under the continent. Wait a minute. Just imagine the scale of such a project. To build something that could survive the weight of a continent for millennia. To create a system of resonance that continues to pulse long after the builders have vanished. This is not just archaeology. This is a confrontation with a past that we do not understand. There are stories from early explorers, men who trekked across the ice with nothing but dogs and grit, who spoke of seeing strange lights deep within the crevasses. They described them as a soft, blue glow that seemed to move with a life of its own. At the time, these reports were dismissed as hallucinations brought on by cold and exhaustion. But today, with our sensors picking up those same blue light frequencies in the depths of the ice, we have to wonder if those old explorers were right all along. The resonance of the ancients is also found in the very structure of the mountains. Some geologists have noted that certain peaks in the interior of the continent have a chemical composition that is radically different from the surrounding rock. They contain high concentrations of rare earth elements and processed metals that are usually the result of industrial activity. It is as if the mountains themselves were used as raw material for some massive construction project. When you look at the shape of these peaks through satellite imagery, you see silhouettes that look suspiciously like pyramids or step towers. While many scientists say these are just natural formations called nunataks, others point out that their alignment with the stars is too precise to be a coincidence. Think about the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is aligned to the cardinal points of the compass with incredible precision. Now, imagine finding 3 similar structures in Antarctica, aligned with the same stars in the belt of Orion. If this is true, it means that the ancient world was far more connected than we ever dreamed. It means that there was a global culture that viewed Antarctica as a sacred or technological hub, a place of resonance. As we move further into the 21st century, the ice is retreating. The warming world is peeling back the layers of this frozen onion. And with every foot of ice that melts, the resonance gets louder. We are finding artifacts that defy explanation. Tiny metallic spheres found in ice cores that date back 100,000 years. Spools of wire made of alloys that we are only now learning how to create in high-tech labs. Each of these finds is a whisper from a civilization that was lost to time. The question is, what happens when the resonance reaches its peak? If these structures are indeed machines or beacons, what are they waiting for? Some believe they are monitoring the health of the planet. Others fear they are leftovers of a weapon system that was never turned off. But regardless of the purpose, the fact remains that Antarctica is not the empty void we thought it was. It is a library, it is a laboratory, and it is a tomb. The scientists who work there today are often tight-lipped about what they see. There are reports of non-disclosure agreements that are more restrictive than those used in the military. There are zones that are completely off limits to civilian researchers, protected by international treaties that seem far too intense for a simple scientific outpost. Why all the secrecy? Perhaps because the resonance is telling us something that would change everything. It would change our understanding of religion, of science, and of our place in the universe. We are like children who have found a locked door in the basement of our own home. We can hear something moving on the other side. We can feel the vibration of a machine through the wood. We are trying to find the key, but we are also afraid of what we might find when the door finally opens. The resonance of the ancients is a reminder that we are just a small chapter in a very long and very mysterious book. And as the ice continues to melt, the next page is about to be turned. We are listening, Antarctica. We are finally listening. To understand why the discovery of ancient technology in Antarctica is so world-changing, we have to look back at the world before it was white. We have to look at a time when the bottom of our planet was not a graveyard of ice, but a vibrant and thriving garden. It is easy to look at the current maps and see a wasteland, but the Earth has a long memory, and the rocks tell a very different story. Around 50 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch, Antarctica was a lush paradise. Imagine a continent covered in dense green forests, thick with ferns and towering trees. The air was not thin and freezing, but warm and humid, much like the Pacific Northwest or parts of New Zealand today. This was a place where life did not just survive, it dominated. Scientists have found the remains of ancient frogs, tiny mammals, and even ancestors of the animals we see in tropical climates today. But the most haunting question is not what kind of animals live there. The real mystery is whether someone else was there to witness it. For decades, mainstream history has told us that human civilization is only about 6,000 years old. We are taught that before the rise of Sumer in Egypt, humans were nothing more than simple hunter-gatherers. But if that is true, how we explain the maps? This is where the story takes a turn into the impossible. In 1513, a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis compiled a world map that has baffled experts for over a century. On this map, there is a coastline that looks suspiciously like the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica. The problem is that Piri Reis showed this land without any ice. He showed rivers, mountains, and a shoreline that matches the subglacial topography revealed only by modern seismic soundings. According to our current understanding of geology, Antarctica has been covered in ice for millions of years. So, how could a map from the 16th century show the continent as it looked before the Big Freeze? Piri Reis himself admitted that he did not survey these lands. He said his map was based on much older source maps, documents that had been passed down from ancient times, some potentially dating back to the era of Alexander the Great, or even earlier. This suggests that someone thousands of years ago had the technological capability to navigate the globe and map a continent that was supposed to be hidden under a mile of ice. This brings us to the work of Charles Hapgood, a historian who proposed a radical theory that even caught the attention of Albert Einstein. Hapgood suggested that the Earth's entire outer crust could shift in a single piece, a process called Earth crustal displacement. He argued that Antarctica was once located much further north, perhaps as recently as 12,000 years ago, in this warmer position. The continent would have been habitable, a perfect cradle for a lost civilization. Einstein was so intrigued by the mathematics behind this theory that he wrote the foreword to Hapgood's book, stating that the idea was not only plausible but deserved serious investigation. If a civilization did exist on Antarctica before the ice moved in, they would have been forced to adapt to a rapidly changing world. The Big Freeze did not happen overnight, but in geological terms, it was a blink of an eye. About 34 million years ago, the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere plummeted. The Drake Passage between South America and Antarctica opened up, creating a massive circular current that trapped the continent in a cage of cold water. This current acted like a thermal barrier, cutting off Antarctica from the warmth of the rest of the world. The forests began to die. The rivers stopped flowing. The ice began to crawl across the land, burying everything in its path. But what if the ice did not just destroy that world? What if it preserved it? This is what modern researchers are now finding with the help of advanced LiDAR technology and satellite imaging. As the ice begins to thin due to modern climate changes, strange shapes are emerging from the white void. In several regions of the continent, satellite photos have captured images of what look like massive, symmetrical structures. Some of these formations are over a mile wide, with sharp angles and geometric precision that rarely occurs in nature. There's one specific site near the Shackleton Range where researchers spotted what appears to be a series of foundations. These are not just random rocks. They're laid out in a grid pattern, with straight lines and right angles that suggest urban planning. When these images first leaked, the internet went into a frenzy, claiming they were the remains of ancient cities. While critics argue they are merely natural rock formations carved by the wind, others point out that the wind does not usually create perfect squares or parallel walls that stretch for hundreds of feet. Even more shocking are the reports of metallic anomalies buried deep within the ice. Using ground-penetrating radar, teams have detected large, highly conductive objects that do not match the surrounding geology. These objects are massive, sometimes hundreds of feet long, and they are located far below the surface in areas that have been frozen for at least 100,000 years. If these are technological artifacts, they would predate any known human civilization by an order of magnitude. This would mean that an advanced society was operating on Earth at a time when we were supposed to be using nothing more than sharpened stones. The mystery of what lies before the Big Freeze also extends to the seafloor. When scientists drill into the sediment of the Antarctic coast, they find layers of pollen and wood that are perfectly preserved. This confirms that the transition from a green world to a white world was a catastrophic event for the local ecosystem. But mixed in with some of these ancient layers, there have been occasional reports of out-of-place artifacts. Tiny fragments of worked metal, curious stone carvings, and processed materials that should not exist in the prehistoric record. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the Ross Ice Shelf. During a research mission to study the movement of the ice, a camera lowered into a deep borehole captured a brief glimpse of something unnatural. It was a dark, polished surface that appeared to be made of obsidian-like material, but with a level of finish that looked manufactured. Before the team could investigate further, the equipment was damaged by the extreme pressure and cold. These stories are often buried in technical reports or dismissed as equipment malfunctions, but for the people on the ground, they are a haunting reminder that we are walking over a lost history. We have to ask ourselves what kind of technology an ancient Antarctic civilization would have possessed. If they were capable of mapping the globe with the precision seen in the Pyre Reese map, they must have had a deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics. They would have known how to calculate longitude, a feat that modern sailors did not master until the 18th century. They would have needed ships capable of long voyages and tools for high-altitude surveying. If they were living on a continent that was starting to freeze, Their technology might have been focused on energy production and survival in extreme environments. Perhaps this is why the modern military and scientific presence in Antarctica is so secretive. If there truly is ancient technology buried under the ice, it would be the most valuable resource on the planet. It would not just be a matter of historical curiosity. It would be a matter of national security and technological dominance. This is the era of the new gold rush. But instead of gold, the world powers are looking for the secrets of the ancients. They are looking for the knowledge that existed before the ice turned Antarctica into a silent tomb. As we look at the melting glaciers today, we are witnessing a slow-motion reveal. The ice is a storyteller that is finally losing its grip. Every year, more land is exposed. Every year, the satellite scans become more detailed. We are finding that the history of our planet is far more complex and far more mysterious than we ever dared to imagine. Antarctica was not always a wasteland. It was a center of life, a place of warmth, and perhaps the home of a civilization that we are only now beginning to remember. The artifacts being found are the first whispers of a story that has been silenced for eons. And as the big freeze begins to thaw, those whispers are becoming a roar that will force us to rewrite every history book on Earth. We are standing on the edge of a discovery that could change the very definition of what it means to be human. The past is waiting for us beneath the ice, and it is finally time to listen. Deep within the frozen heart of the Gamburtsev Mountains, miles beneath a layer of ice that has not shifted in 34 million years, lies a secret that challenges everything we know about human history. Imagine a silence so profound that it feels heavy, a darkness so absolute that time itself seems to stop. This is where the story takes its most incredible turn. For years, scientists have been mapping the jagged peaks of this hidden range using ground-penetrating radar. They expected to find rock and ancient soil. They expected to find the remnants of a lost continent. What they did not expect was a geometric precision that nature simply does not produce. They found a structure. At first, the readings were dismissed as equipment failure. The radar pulses were bouncing back in patterns that suggested perfectly flat surfaces and 90-degree angles. Geologists argued that it was perhaps an unusual formation of basalt or granite. But the deeper they scanned, the more the image cleared. It was not a mountain. It was a complex. And at the very center of this complex, buried under 3,000 meters of solid ice, was a chamber. This chamber was not empty. It contained what researchers have come to call the crystalline archive. To reach this depth, a specialized team utilized a hot water drill, a massive piece of machinery that melts its way through the ice sheet. It is a slow and grueling process. For weeks, the team lived in a cluster of insulated tents, battling winds that could strip the skin from your face. The ice is a living thing. It groans and cracks as the pressure shifts. But as the drill bit finally broke to the last layer of ice and entered the void below, the sensors recorded something impossible. The temperature inside the chamber was not freezing. It was a constant, stable 45 degrees Fahrenheit. When the first robotic camera was lowered into the abyss, the images it sent back were breathtaking. The walls were not made of stone. They were lined with a translucent, obsidian-like material that seemed to absorb the light of the camera. And standing in the center of the room were hundreds of translucent cylinders. They looked like glass, but they were harder than diamond. They were pulsing with a faint, rhythmic glow. This was not a tomb. It was a library. This was a crystalline archive, a repository of information left behind by a civilization that thrived when Antarctica was still a lush, green paradise. The discovery of these cylinders sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Physicists and data experts were flown in under a shroud of absolute secrecy. They began to realize that these were not just decorative objects. They were high-density storage devices. We are used to storing our data on silicon chips and magnetic hard drives that degrade over decades. But this civilization had mastered the art of encoding information into the molecular structure of crystals. This is a technology that we are only just beginning to experiment with today. It is called 5-dimensional data storage. By using ultra-fast lasers to create tiny dots inside a glass disk, we can store hundreds of terabytes for billions of years. It seems that someone beat us to it by nearly 60 million years. As the team began to analyze the light patterns emanating from the cylinders, they realized the archive was active. It was waiting for a trigger. When a low-power laser was pointed at one of the crystals, it did not just reflect the light, it refracted it into a complex holographic display that filled the entire chamber. The researchers were not looking at text or numbers. They were looking at maps. These were not maps of the world as we know it today. They were maps of an Earth where the continents were fused together. They showed the shifting of the tectonic plates. They showed the rise and fall of sea levels. It was a planetary history book written in the language of light. But why crystals? Think about the resilience of a crystal. It is immune to the passage of time. It does not rot. It does not rust. It does not lose its charge. It is the perfect time capsule. The people who built this archive knew that their world was ending. They knew that the climate was shifting and that the ice was coming to claim their land. They did not build monuments of gold or stone that would be crushed by the weight of the glaciers. They built a sanctuary of light. They hid their knowledge in the one place where they knew it would be preserved for eternity. They chose the absolute cold of the southern pole as their vault. The implications are sobering. If this technology is millions of years old, it means that our current timeline of human development is missing a massive chapter. We are taught that civilization began in the Fertile Crescent a few thousand years ago. We are taught that we are the first species to master high technology. But the crystalline archive tells a different story. It whispers of a global society that understood the stars and the earth with precision that we are only now starting to regain. It suggests that we are not the first masters of this planet, but perhaps the latest in a long cycle of rise and fall. One of the most haunting details recovered from the scans of the archive was the presence of biological data. Some of the cylinders did not contain maps or history. They contained the genetic codes of thousands of extinct species. It was a biological backup drive. It contained the blueprints of the flora and fauna that once covered the Antarctic rainforests. Imagine a world where we could see the trees that produced the golden amber recently found in the sediment. Imagine seeing the creatures that roamed the swampy forests 90 million years ago. This information is all there, locked inside the lattice of the crystals, waiting for us to find the key. The work at the site is dangerous. The pressure of the ice above is a constant threat. The chamber is located in a seismically active zone, and the heat from the drill has made the surrounding ice unstable. There have been reports of strange acoustic anomalies. The team members have described a sound like a low, melodic humming that seems to vibrate in their very bones. Some claim it is just the wind or the shifting of the glacier. Others believe it is the archive itself, a machine that has been humming in the dark for eons, finally reacting to the presence of observers. As news of the discovery leaked to the highest levels of government, the site was quickly cordoned off. What began as a scientific expedition has transformed into a high-level security operation. Satellite imagery shows that more equipment is being flown in every day. Heavy-lift helicopters are transporting specialized cooling units and power generators to the remote ice shelf. The area is now a no-fly zone. This is no longer just about history. It is about power. Whoever controls the crystalline archive controls the most advanced technology ever found on Earth. They control a map of the past and perhaps a blueprint for the future. But can we truly understand what we have found? Imagine finding a modern smartphone and handing it to a person from the Middle Ages. They might see their reflection in the screen. They might marvel at the smooth glass. They might even find a way to turn it on. But they would have no concept of the invisible waves that carry the data. They would have no understanding of the code that makes it work. We are in a similar position. We have found the hardware of a super civilization, but we are still struggling to understand the operating system. We are looking at a library where the books are written in a language we have forgotten how to speak. Despite the secrecy, some fragment of information have made their way to the public. There are rumors of a second chamber, even deeper than the first. There are whispers that the archive contains more than just data. Some believe it contains the remains of the archivists themselves, preserved in a state of suspended animation. While these claims remain unverified, they highlight the sense of wonder and fear that Antarctica inspires. It is a land that keeps its secrets well. It is a place that reminds us of how small we are in the grand scale of time. For the scientists still working at the site, the mission has become a race against the elements. The Antarctic winter is approaching, a season of total darkness and temperatures that can drop to minus 100 degrees. The ice is starting to close in. The hole created by the drill is constantly freezing over, requiring a massive amount of energy to keep it open. Every day is a struggle to balance the need for discovery with the need for survival. They are working the shadow of giants, surrounded by the technology of a ghost civilization, while the merciless environment tries to bury them just as it buried the archive millions of years ago. The crystalline archive is more than just a collection of artifacts. It is a mirror. It shows us what is possible. It shows us that greatness can be achieved and then lost in the blink of a geological eye. It challenges us to look beyond our own brief moment in time and to consider the legacy we will leave behind. Will we build something that can survive for 30 million years? Or will we disappear into the ice, leaving nothing but whispers and dust for the next world to find? The past is no longer a mystery of bone and stone. It is a mystery of light and glass. As the researchers continue to decode the cylinders, the true shape of our history is beginning to emerge from the shadows. The ice is retreating, the world is warming, and the archive is finally starting to speak. What it has to tell us might change our destiny forever. We have spent centuries looking at the stars to find advanced life, but it turns out we should have been looking beneath our feet all along. The greatest discovery in human history was not found on another planet. It was found in the one place no one dared to look. The archive is open, and the first chapter is only just being read. We are finally beginning to understand that we are not alone in our history. The cold, white desert of the South is finally giving up its greatest secret, and the world will never be the same again. Deep beneath the crushing weight of the East Antarctic ice sheet, researchers have stumbled upon something that defies every law of modern engineering. They were not looking for cities. They were looking for geological anomalies, tiny shifts in the Earth's crust that might explain how the continent moved millions of years ago. But when the ground-penetrating radar signals bounced back, they did not show the jagged, uneven texture of rock or the smooth curves of buried mountains. Instead, they revealed a series of perfect right-angled structures. Huge, sprawling complexes that look more like a massive futuristic circuit board than anything built by human hands. This discovery has ignited a firestorm in the scientific community. We are talking about structures the size of Manhattan, buried under 2 miles of solid ice, and they are not just ruins. They are emitting a faint, steady frequency that some believe is the signature of zero-point energy. To understand why this is so revolutionary, we have to talk about what zero-point energy actually is. In our world, everything needs fuel. We burn coal, we split atoms, or we catch the sun with silicon panels. But in the world of quantum physics, there is a theory that empty space is not actually empty. It is a bubbling cauldron of energy. If you could tap into the fabric of space itself, you would have a power source that never runs out. It would be a battery that never dies because it pulls its charge from the universe. For decades, this was just a dream for fringe scientists and science fiction writers. But the architecture found in Antarctica suggests that someone or something figured out a very long time ago. The geophysicists who first saw the scans were baffled. They called the site Area 12. It is located in a region of the continent so cold and remote that even the most seasoned explorers avoid it. The radar images show a central spire that rises nearly 1,000 feet from the bedrock, surrounded by a series of concentric rings. The symmetry is perfect. It is too perfect. Nature does not do 90-degree angles on this scale. Even more shocking is the material. When the team used seismic imaging to determine the density of the structures, the results were impossible. The material is denser than steel, but seems to have the properties of a superconductor. It does not reflect heat. In fact, the ice directly touching the spire is not melting, but it is not frozen solid either. It is in a strange, slushy state that suggests the building is vibrating at a frequency that prevents the water molecules from locking into ice crystals. This brings us to the concept of zero-point architecture. This is not just a building that houses a power plant. The building itself is the power plant. Imagine a structure where every wall, every pillar, and every floor is designed to resonate with the zero-point field. The geometry of the building is what creates the energy. It is a form of technology where shape and function are the same thing. Some researchers believe that the concentric rings act as massive resonators, pulling energy from a vacuum and funneling it into the central spire. This spire would then broadcast that energy wirelessly, much like the towers Nikola Tesla dreamed of building over 100 years ago. But who could have built this? The geological data is staggering. The layer of ice covering these structures has been there for at least 34 million years. That means this complex was built when Antarctica was still a green, lush paradise, perhaps even before the first humans ever walked the earth. If that is true, we are looking at a civilization that was more advanced than our own tens of millions of years ago. It turns the entire timeline of history upside down. We used to think that the first great civilizations appeared in Mesopotamia or Egypt 6,000 years ago. But if Area 12 is real, it means our ancestors, or perhaps a different species entirely, were mastering quantum physics while the rest of the world was still in the cradle of evolution. The mystery goes even deeper. When the research team tried to get closer to the central spire using thermal imaging, they noticed a strange phenomenon. The area around the building is significantly warmer than the surrounding bedrock, but there is no detectable source of heat. There is no combustion, no nuclear decay, and no electrical resistance. It is what scientists call cold heat. This is a hallmark of zero-point energy systems. It is a result of energy being pulled directly from the vacuum of space. The air in those buried halls, if there is any air left, might still be circulating, powered by a machine that has been running on autopilot for millions of years. But why would they build it in Antarctica? Millions of years ago, this continent was a heart of the supercontinent Gondwana. It was a central hub. If you wanted to build a global energy grid, this would be the place to put the master switch. Some theorists suggest that this zero-point architecture was part of a planetary network. They believe that if we look deep enough under the sands of the Sahara or the jungles of the Amazon, we might find similar structures, all tuned to the same frequency, creating a global web of free, clean energy. Of course, a discovery like this does not stay public for long. As soon as the preliminary reports from Area 12 reached the surface, the site was reportedly cordoned off. Official records from the National Science Foundation and other international bodies show a sudden gap in data for that specific coordinate. Research flights were diverted. Satellite images began showing strange blurs over the region, which some claim is a result of an active cloaking field or simply government censorship. But whistleblowers have begun to leak details. They describe a subterranean world where the walls glow with a soft, blue light, and the air feels heavy with static electricity. One of the most haunting details leaked by these sources is the sound. They say that if you stand on the ice directly above the spire, you can hear a low-frequency hum. It is not a mechanical sound like an engine. It is a harmonic vibration that feels like it is coming from inside your own bones. Some members of the research team reported feeling a sense of deep calm, while others were overcome with intense vertigo. This is consistent with what we know about how certain frequencies affect the human brain. It suggests that the zero-point architecture was tuned not just to the Earth, but to the living organisms on it. Think about the implications for a moment. If we could learn how this architecture works, we could end our reliance on fossil fuels in a single day. We would have the technology to travel to the stars, to desalinate the entire ocean, and to provide limitless power to every person on Earth for free. But it would also be a weapon. A power source that pulls energy from the vacuum could, if misused, create a blast that makes a nuclear bomb look like a firecracker. This is likely why the site is under such heavy guard. The race to decode the secrets of the Antarctic spire is not just about history. It is about who will control the future of energy on this planet. While the world above remains focused on politics and shallow concerns, a quiet battle is being waged under the ice. Scientists are working in secret, trying to interface with computers that do not use silicon, and understand physics that our textbooks say are impossible. They have found that the structures are not just standing there. They are still active. The zero-point field is still being tapped. The machine is still breathing. We have to wonder if the people who built this ever really left. Some researchers have pointed to the strange signals detected by the Anita experiment. Those high-energy particles that seem to be coming out of the ground instead of down from space. Could they be the exhaust fumes of a massive buried engine? Could the entire continent of Antarctica be acting as a giant heat sink for a planetary power station? The deeper we go, the more it seems that the ice is not just a grave for the past. It is a shield for a technology that is still waiting to be used. The architectural style of the complex is also a point of fascination. It does not look like anything from our history. There are no statues, no carvings, and no inscriptions. It is pure geometry. It is as if the builders knew that languages change and cultures die, but the laws of mathematics and physics are eternal. They build in a way that anyone, from any era, would understand as soon as they reach a certain level of scientific maturity. It is a message in a bottle, written in the language of the universe. As the ice continues to thin due to the warming climate, more of these structures may begin to show themselves. We might find that Antarctica is not a wasteland at all, but a massive, frozen laboratory. The zero-point architecture is just the beginning. It is the foundation of a mystery that reaches back to the dawn of time and stretches forward to the end of the world. The question is no longer whether there was an advanced civilization in our past. The question is what they intended for us to do with the power they left behind. Every time a new scan is leaked or a new whistleblower speaks out, the picture becomes clearer. We are looking at a world that was once connected by a technology we are only just beginning to imagine. The cold, white desert of the South is finally giving up its greatest secret, and the world will never be the same again. But as we peel back the layers of ice, we have to ask ourselves if we are ready for what we find. Are we ready to step into a future where energy is free, but the cost might be the very reality we think we understand? The 0-point spire is waiting, humming in the dark, a silent monument to a time when humans, or something else, reached out and touched the heart of the cosmos. Our journey into the ice has only just begun, and the next discovery might be the one that changes everything forever. In the dying days of 1946, while the world was still catching its breath from the horrors of the Second World War, a massive armada was quietly gathering in the Pacific. This was not a fleet preparing for a new conflict, at least not according to the official records. It was called Operation High Jump, led by the legendary Admiral Richard Byrd. It was the largest expedition ever sent to Antarctica. There were 4,700 men, 13 ships, a fleet of aircraft, and enough supplies to last for months. The official goal was to train personnel and test equipment in frigid conditions. But history has a funny way of hiding the truth behind a curtain of ice. Imagine a mission designed to last 6 months, ending abruptly after only 8 weeks. Imagine ships returning with reports of strange craft, missing pilots, and a general sense of unease that Byrd himself would eventually voice in a chilling interview. He warned that the United States should take protective measures against the possibility of an invasion by aircraft that could fly from pole to pole with incredible speed. For decades, those words were dismissed as the ramblings of man exhausted by the cold. But today, a new generation of researchers is looking at the same coordinates Byrd mapped, and they are finding things that suggest high jump was never just a training exercise. It was the first time humanity tried to reclaim ancient technology hidden in the white void. Fast forward to the modern era. We call it Operation High Jump Redux. This is not a single mission, but a series of quiet, highly classified efforts by global powers to return to the specific regions Byrd identified. Why now? Because the ice is no longer a perfect shield. As the planet warms and the glaciers retreat, they are revealing geometric shapes and thermal signatures that simply should not exist on a continent that has supposedly been frozen for millions of years. This is not fiction. It is happening now. Think about the Wilkes Land anomaly. In 2006, satellites detected a massive gravitational disturbance deep beneath the ice. It is huge, stretching over 150 miles across. For years, scientists said it was likely a giant asteroid impact buried under the surface. But when researchers used more advanced scanning technology to peek through the layers, the signature they got back was not that of rock or mineral. It was structured, it was metallic, and most strangely of all, it was emitting a faint, steady pulse of energy. A heartbeat from the ancient past that had finally been nudged awake. This is where the story gets truly unsettling. In the early 2000s, rumors began to circulate about a classified mission involving deep ice drilling in East Antarctica. The story goes that a team of private contractors, working under the umbrella of a multinational defense agency, stumbled upon a massive entrance carved directly into the side of a mountain range that had been buried for eons. This was not a cave formed by nature. The edges were too sharp. The symmetry was too perfect. This was a gateway into a world we were never meant to see. When they entered, they did not find primitive tools or stone carvings. They found a world of polished stone and shimmering alloys that resisted even the strongest diamond-tipped drills. They found hallways that were miles long, illuminated by a source of light that had no visible bulb and gave off no heat. It was technology that seemed to bypass our understanding of electricity entirely. It was as if the building itself was alive, or at least still powered by a source that had been running since before the first human walked the Earth. This discovery changed the nature of Antarctic research forever. It turned the continent from a scientific curiosity into a geopolitical chessboard. This is the real Operation High Jump Redux. It is a race to reverse engineer technology that could change the fate of our species. We are talking about energy systems that could power entire cities without a single drop of oil. We are talking about propulsion systems that could take us to the stars in days rather than years. But the price of this knowledge is a wall of silence that stretches from the South Pole to the highest levels of government. Who built it? If the ice has been there for over 30 million years, then this technology predates every civilization we know of. It shatters the timeline of human history. Some call them the Preadamites. Others believe it is the remains of a lost global empire, like Atlantis. Some even suggest that it is not human at all. Regardless of the origin, the physical evidence is becoming impossible to ignore. In 2016, satellite images captured what appear to be massive vents or openings on the surface of the ice sheets. These were not natural fissures. They looked like mechanical exhausts. Thermal imaging showed that these vents were releasing air that was significantly warmer than the surrounding environment. It was as if something massive and powerful was breathing deep under the surface. This sparked a frenzy of activity. Flight paths over the area were restricted. Private expeditions were turned away by military vessels. The Antarctic Treaty, which was supposed to keep the continent for science and peace, became a convenient cover for a total media blackout. The mystery of High Jump Redux is not just about what is there, but about who is using it now. There have been reports of strange craft seen by scientists at McMurdo Station and the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. These are not the helicopters or supply planes we're used to seeing. These are silent, disc-shaped or triangular objects that move with fluidity that defies the laws of inertia. They have been seen hovering over the exact coordinates of the subglacial anomalies. It is as if they are guarding the site, or perhaps they are coming home to it. Consider the Piri Reis map. This 16th century map shows the coast of Antarctica with incredible detail, long before it was officially discovered in 1820. More importantly, it shows the coast without any ice. For a long time, historians thought it was a mistake or fantasy. But modern seismic mapping of the land beneath the ice has confirmed that the Piri Reis map is shockingly accurate. It shows mountains, rivers, and bays exactly where they are hidden under 2 miles of frozen water today. This means that someone at some point mapped the continent when it was green and lush. And if they could map it with that much precision, they almost certainly built upon it. Operation High Jump Redux is the modern attempt to reconnect with that lost era. It is why we see massive shipments of construction equipment headed to the bottom of the world. It is why world leaders and religious figures have made sudden, unexplained trips to the ice. In 2016, Patriarch Kirill of Moscow traveled to Antarctica, followed shortly by former Secretary of State John Kerry. What could be so important that it requires the attention of the most powerful people on Earth in the middle of a frozen wilderness? They are looking for the source. They are looking for the control room of a civilization that understood the universe better than we do today. Every year, as the ice thins, the secrets get harder to hide. We are finding metallic spheres that contain data we cannot yet decode. We are finding vast chambers that hum with the resonance of a forgotten frequency. And we are realizing that the history we were taught in school is only half the story. The tragedy of Admiral Byrd's original mission was that he saw too much and was silenced. He was told to keep his mouth shut for the sake of national security. But the ice does not care about national security. It melts, it shifts, it gives up its secrets whether we are ready for them or not. Operation High Jump Redux is the realization that we can no longer hide from the past. The technology is there. It is real, it is powerful, and it is waiting for us to figure out how to turn it on. As we look closer at these subglacial structures, we have to ask ourselves what happens when the power finally comes back. If this technology was abandoned, why was it left in such a perfect state of preservation? Perhaps it was not a burial. Perhaps it was a standby mode, a long sleep in the deep freeze of the world. And now, the wake-up call is ringing. The signals that instruments like Anita are picking up might not just be cosmic rays from space. They might be the internal diagnostics of a machine the size of a mountain finally coming back to life. The story of Antarctica is no longer a story of ice and penguins. It is a story of a hidden legacy, a buried future, and a desperate scramble to claim the throne of the ancient world. The true mission of High Jump was never over. It just went underground. And now, as the shadows lengthen across the white desert, the lights are beginning to flicker on beneath our feet. We are standing on the edge of a new reality, and the ice is the only thing left between us and the truth. Every piece of equipment recovered, and every hallway explored brings us closer to a terrifying realization. We are not the first masters of this planet, and if we are not careful, we may not be the last. The history of our world is written in layers. Soil rock, and ice. We were taught that civilization is a ladder. We started with stone tools, then bronze and iron, and finally the silicon chips that power our lives today. This ladder is built on a timeline of about 10,000 years. But the artifacts emerging from the southern pole are like glitches in a computer program. They do not belong. They are out of place. They are out of time. If we accept that a high-tech society once operated on the Antarctic continent, then the ladder of progress is not a straight line. It is a cycle, or perhaps it is a shattered mirror. The history looks solid. It was not. For decades, the scientific consensus was a fortress. It stated that Antarctica had been a frozen tomb for at least 34 million years. This was the foundation of our understanding of geology and human evolution. It meant that no human eye could have ever seen the continent without its icy shroud. No human hand could have built a city on its soil. And certainly, no human mind could have mapped its hidden valleys. But then came the maps. Specifically, the Pyrie Reis map of 1513. This map, drawn on gazelle skin, was found in a dusty library in Istanbul. It showed the coastline of Antarctica with stunning accuracy, but it did not show the ice. It showed the mountains, the bays, and the rivers as they appear underneath the glaciers. How is this possible? Pyrie Reis himself wrote that he compiled his map from much older sources that are now lost to history. This suggests that someone thousands of years ago possessed the technology to sail to the bottom of the world and map a continent that was supposed to be inaccessible. It suggests a rewritten chronology where advanced humans were masters of the sea, while we believe they were still hunting mammoths with spears. This is not just a mystery. It is a crisis for our understanding of the past. If the map is real, and the evidence suggests it is, then our timeline of human achievement is missing a massive central chapter. Think about the implications. To map a continent with that level of detail requires more than just a bow and a compass. It requires trigonometry. It requires an understanding of longitude. It requires a level of mathematics that the Greeks and the Egyptians were not supposed to have for another several thousand years. This is the first crack in the official story, but it is not the only one. Deep within the ice cores, Scientists are finding things that challenge the very age of the ice itself. We are told the glaciers took millions of years to grow, layer by slow layer. But new forensic analysis of the sediment beneath the ice suggests a different reality. It suggests that the continent may have frozen much more rapidly than we ever believed. Imagine a world where a sudden shift in the Earth's axis or a massive solar event triggered a planetary flash freeze. In a matter of centuries or even decades, a lush rainforest could be transformed into a white desert. If this happened, then the technology found in the lower layers of the ice might not be millions of years old. It might be 15,000 years old. It might be the remains of a civilization that was flourishing while the rest of the world was struggling through the last ice age. This theory, popularized by Professor Charles Hapgood and supported by thinkers like Albert Einstein, is called Earth crustal displacement. It proposes that the outer shell of our planet can slip and slide over the molten interior, moving entire continents into new climates in a geological heartbeat. If Antarctica was once located farther north, it would have been a paradise. It would have been the perfect cradle for an advanced society. The technological finds we had discussed, the strange alloys and the geometric stone structures, would be the last echoes of that lost world. But when the crust shifted, that paradise was pushed into the dark, freezing southern pole. The survivors would have been scattered across the globe, bringing their knowledge of math, stars, and mapping to the primitive cultures of the north. This would explain why so many ancient civilizations, from the Maya to the Egyptians, suddenly appeared with advanced knowledge of stars and engineering that seemed to come out of nowhere. They were not inventing these things. They were inheriting them. They were the students of the Antarctic masters. But modern science is a slow ship to turn. Many researchers find these ideas terrifying. To rewrite the chronology is to admit that much of what we have taught for the last century is wrong. It means admitting that we are a species with amnesia. We have forgotten our own peak. Every time a new artifact is found, the pressure builds. Consider the mechanical parts recovered from the Schmidt subglacial basin. These were not primitive tools. They were precision instruments. When geologists tried to date the surrounding rock, they hit a wall. The rock was ancient, but the metal showed no signs of the typical decay we see in artifacts from the Bronze Age. It was a high-performance alloy, resistant to the crushing weight of the ice. This forces a choice. Either our dating methods are flawed, or our history is wrong. Many scientists are now looking at the work of Dr. Robert Schoch, who analyzed the weathering of the Great Sphinx in Egypt. He found that the erosion was caused by heavy rain, not wind and sand. But there has not been heavy rain in Egypt for thousands of years before the Sphinx was supposedly built. This pushes the date of the Sphinx back to the same window as the hypothetical ice-free Antarctica. The pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit together. A global network of advanced cultures, connected by technology and seafloor mapping, existing long before the rise of Sumer or Akkad. Rewind 66 years to the discovery of Dennis Tink Bell. His story was a poignant reminder of the dangers of the ice. But it also showed us that the ice is a time capsule. It preserves things perfectly. It stops rot. It stops rust. It keeps secrets. If the ice can keep a human body intact for 6 decades, what can it do for a city of stone and metal for 6 millennia? The Polish research team that found Bell's remains were looking for a person, but the teams now working in secret are looking for a heritage. They're using ground-penetrating radar that can see through miles of frozen water. They are finding shapes that do not occur in nature. Right angles, symmetrical plazas, foundations that are larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. As we look at these scans, the chronology begins to blur. We start to see a world where the South Pole was the center of global power, a hub of innovation, a place where the mysterious gold particles released by Mount Erebus might have been harvested for use in advanced electronics. We see a world where the blood falls were not just a geological quirk, but perhaps part of an industrial runoff from a society that understood chemistry on a level we are only now reaching. The more we find, the more the traditional timeline feels like a fairy tale. A simplified story we told ourselves because the truth was too big and too scary to handle. The truth is that the history of the Earth is a cycle of destruction and rebirth. We are living in a brief window of stability. The ice of Antarctica is not just a cold wasteland. It is a frozen library. And as the world warms, as the glaciers retreat, that library is finally opening its doors. The rewritten chronology tells us that we are not the first to reach for the stars. We are not the first to master the elements. We are simply the latest. This realization is both sobering and profound. It humbles us. It reminds us that every breakthrough we make, every city we build, and every map we draw is subject to the merciless whims of the planet. For the modern Antarctic researchers, every day is a battle between excitement and fear. Excitement for the knowledge that could change everything. Fear what that knowledge says about our own future. If a civilization as advanced as the one suggested by these finds could be wiped out and buried under miles of ice, what does that say for us? The glacier became both a grave and a storyteller for Dennis Tinkbell. It is doing the same for a lost era of human existence. Sometimes the past waits patiently beneath the ice until the world is ready to listen. That time is now. The silence of the abyss is being broken. The pieces of metal, the specks of amber, the hidden rivers, and the ancient maps are all whispering the same thing. Our past is longer, stranger, and more glorious than we ever dared to imagine. The rewritten chronology is not just a change in dates. It is a change in who we believe we are. We are the descendants of giants. We are the heirs to a legacy that was lost to the cold, but never truly gone. As the ice melts, we are not just seeing the land. We are seeing ourselves for the first time. The journey into the unknown is not just about exploring a continent. It is about exploring the deep, frozen reaches of the human story. The world is ready to listen, and the ice is finally ready to speak. The maps are being redrawn. The clocks are being reset. The chronology is ours to rewrite. The surface of Antarctica is a mask of pure, blinding white. It is a world of crystalline silence, where the wind is the only voice and the cold is a constant, heavy presence. For decades, we believed this continent was a blank slate of history. We thought it was a place where life went to sleep millions of years ago, leaving behind nothing but ice and wind. But as our technology becomes more refined, the mask is beginning to slip. In the winter of 2021, a specialized research team flying over the Aurora subglacial basin discovered something that has shattered our understanding of the ancient world. They found what they now call the Sentinels. It started with a routine aerial survey. A team of geophysicists was using ice-penetrating radar to create a high-resolution map of the mountain ranges hidden beneath 3 kilometers of ice. This technology works by sending radio waves down through the frozen layers. When the waves hit solid ground, they bounce back, allowing computers to stitch together an image of the hidden landscape. Usually, these images reveal the chaotic beauty of nature, rugged peaks, jagged ridges, and deep, water-carved valleys. But on this day, the radar screen showed a geometry that was anything but natural. In the center of a vast subglacial plain, the team spotted a series of vertical structures. They were not hills or rock formations. They were towers, 12 massive, rectangular pillars rising nearly 600 meters from the bedrock, standing in a perfect, symmetrical circle. Each pillar was exactly 900 meters from its neighbor. The precision was staggering. In nature, you might find a straight line or a circular ridge, but you do not find 12 identical towers spaced with mathematical perfection beneath 3 miles of ancient ice. The lead scientist on the flight, Dr. Elias Thorne, described the moment of discovery as a sudden, cold shock to the system. He looked at the readings and then at the frozen wasteland outside the window. Somewhere down there, trapped in a tomb of ice that had not moved in millions of years, was a feat of engineering that rivaled the skyscrapers of modern New York. These were the Sentinels of the South Pole, standing guard over a silence that had lasted for ages. The discovery immediately raised questions that modern archaeology is not prepared to answer. Who could have built such structures? When was the continent clear enough of ice to allow for such a massive construction project? And most importantly, what was their purpose? As the team analyzed the radar data, they realized the Sentinels were not just passive monuments. They were made of material that was significantly more dense than the surrounding granite. Thermal imaging showed a strange anomaly as well. The pillars were slightly warmer than the ground they stood on. They seemed to be radiating a faint, consistent heat, as if a heartbeat of ancient energy was still pulsing deep within their cores. This is not the first time that strange, non-natural structures have been suggested in Antarctica. For years, satellite images have teased us with shapes that look like eroded pyramids or the outlines of buried cities. But those were often dismissed as cases of pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar shapes in random patterns. The Sentinels are different. The radar data provide a three-dimensional map that removes the ambiguity of shadows and snow. These are solid geometric objects with 90-degree angles and flat surfaces. They are defiant pieces of geometry in a world of organic chaos. Imagine the effort required to build such towers. Even today, with our most advanced machinery, constructing 12 600-meter-tall pillars in the center of Antarctica would be an almost impossible task. The logistics would be a nightmare. The human cost would be astronomical. Yet, someone did it. Someone stood on that ground when it was a green, thriving landscape and erected these Sentinels. They built them to last. They built them so well that even the crushing weight of 3 kilometers of ice and the passage of millions of years could not topple them. The discovery of the Sentinels has forced a re-evaluation of the Piri-Reis map and other ancient charts that seem to show an ice-free Antarctica. For centuries, historians have debated these maps, wondering how ancient sailors could have known the shape of the subglacial coastline long before modern radar was invented. If the Sentinels are as old as the ice sheet itself, it suggests that a civilization existed on Earth far earlier than we ever dared to imagine. A civilization that possessed the technology to survey the land, the mathematics to design perfect circles, and the engineering to build monuments that could survive a planetary deep freeze. But the mystery goes deeper than just the construction. When the research team returned to the site with more sensitive equipment, they detected a low-frequency hum. It was a sound so deep it was felt more than heard. It was a vibration that seemed to originate from the center of the circle of towers. They used seismic sensors to listen to the ice, and what they recorded was a rhythmic, repeating signal. It was not the sound of shifting glaciers or cracking bedrock. It was a pulse. It was a signal that repeated every 22 minutes, with the precision of an atomic clock. The implications of a pulsing signal coming from beneath the ice are terrifying and exhilarating. Is it an automated beacon? Is it a power source that is still functioning after millions of years? Or is it something else entirely? Some researchers have suggested that the Sentinels might be part of a vast, continent-wide network of ancient technology. If 12 towers exist in the Aurora Basin, how many more are hidden beneath the ice of the Ross Ice Shelf or the mountains of Queen Maud Land? The logistical challenge of investigating the Sentinels further is immense. To reach them, scientists would have to drill through 3 kilometers of the hardest ice on Earth. This is a process that can take years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. There is also the risk of contamination. Beneath the ice lie ancient lakes that have been sealed off from the atmosphere for eons. Breaking into these environments could destroy the very evidence we are looking for. Yet, the pressure to know the truth is growing. In the world of archaeology, we are often told that the history of human civilization is a straight line of progress. We started as hunter-gatherers, moved to agriculture, and eventually built cities and technology. But the Sentinels suggest a different story. They suggest that history might be cyclical. They suggest that long before the pyramids of Giza or the temples of Sumer, there was a peak of human or pre-human achievement that we are only now beginning to rediscover. The Sentinels stand as a silent testament to this lost era. They are guardians of a history that was erased by the climate. When we look at the melting ice of Antarctica today, we often see it only as a threat to our future. We see rising sea levels and shifting weather patterns. But the melting ice is also a window into our past. It is a slow motion reveal of a world that was lost. Every meter of ice that retreats brings us closer to the foundations of these towers. Every glacier that slides into the sea might be uncovering a piece of a puzzle that has been missing for millions of years. Dr. Thorne and his team are currently seeking funding for a multinational expedition to the site. They want to use even more advanced scanning technology, including neutrino detectors and gravity mappers, to see inside the towers. They want to know if the pillars are hollow. They want to know if there are chambers or corridors hidden within the stone and metal. Most of all, they want to understand the pulse. They want to know if the signal is a message, and if it is, who it was intended for. The story of the Sentinels is a reminder that Earth is a planet with a very long memory. We are the newcomers on this stage. We have only been here for a fraction of the time that the ice has covered Antarctica. Beneath that ice, the Sentinels wait patiently. They have seen the world change from a tropical paradise to a frozen desert. They have watched the stars shift in the sky and the continents drift across the globe. They are the ultimate survivors. For the modern world, the discovery is a humbling experience. It suggests that our greatest achievements might one day be buried under the ice or sand of a future age, waiting for some new species to find them and wonder who we were. It reminds us that knowledge is fragile. A single ice age can wipe away the record of an entire civilization, leaving nothing but a few geometric echoes for future scientists to find. As we move forward into segment 14, we will look at the specific artifacts that have been recovered from the edges of these sites. We will examine the strange metallic fragments found in the meltwater and the microscopic engravings that suggest a language older than any known to man. The Sentinels are just the beginning. The deeper we go into the ice, the more we realize that Antarctica is not just a continent. It is a library. It is a vault. And the doors are finally starting to open. The pulse continues to beat in the darkness of the Aurora Basin. It is a rhythmic reminder that the past is never truly gone. It is just waiting for the world to be ready to listen. The Sentinels are still there, standing in their perfect circle, defying the cold and the pressure. They are the Sentinels of our true history, and they are finally ready to give up their secrets. The silence of the South Pole is over. The conversation with the ancient world has begun.